What's up, and welcome, Vibe Tribe. It is another fantastic Wednesday night journey we're going to go on with the Herbal Decoding crew. So I hope everyone had a nice 4th of July or whatever you might do if you live in other countries around the beginning of July. I saw lots of explosions in the sky and had a lot of good times with family. So I'm pretty charged up and ready for another fun astro herbalism episode. Possibly many people's favorite thing that we do here. This is crazy enough. We're on the 9th month of doing these, which means only 3 to go, maybe 4 if we toss in Ophiuchus, but I don't want this party to stop. So really glad to see my friends Mario and Michelle, the M&M power couple. Mario looking fresh. Kyle rocking the tank top as is appropriate for Vibrant, and Emily Ridout returns. She is tag teaming in for Gabriel, who is on summer vacation doing dad duty. So what up if you're out there, Gabe? Thanks for your reliable service and enjoy your time off. It's unpaid vacation, but so tonight we're going to be talking about the herbs, the doctrine of signatures, the things that we can know about Cancer season and the plant world, the things that pop up into our awareness around nature at this time of the season, as well as maybe some surprise picks from our master decoders themselves, Michelle and Kyle. What's up, you guys? Welcome everybody to the show. Let's start with Emily. What do you think you've walked into here? How have you been?
I've been great. I'm stoked to be here with you guys. Astro herbalism is one of my favorite things to get to discuss with people because I'm not an herbalist, and a lot of what I wind up doing is tag teaming with holistic practitioners to do their astrology readings. So it's always such a joy to get to pick apart the plants.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I've got some good mythology to bring to the mix. And we know that the medicinal wisdom, Kyle and Michelle have got that on lock. And the Cancer symbolism, well, Mario knows probably more versions of every type of archetype that you could possibly imagine. Kyle, how have you been, man? I hear you just got back from a nice camping trip.
Yeah, dude, it was excellent. It was awesome. I was just joking before the show that we've had like a crazy drought here. And so that's one way to dispel the drought is to go camping, at least in my life. I get curious about that because I have this like really interesting, like playful connection with the weather and stuff like that. So it makes me wonder. But there was this crazy, crazy lightning storm for 2 nights in a row. Body on the ground. I am like, dude, I am charged to the max. I had a lot of like pain and stuff like that prior to this that I've been dealing with for a few months, and it's just like magically gone. And man, I feel great right now. And the height of the sun, the height of the barbecues, the height of the fireworks, man, it just feels great.
Glad to hear it, dude. And hope your family is having as much fun as you appear to be having over there. Your giant baby.
Yeah.
And awesome wife. Hey, and so Michelle, Mario, I know that you've been doing a lot of content. Michelle, especially you, just completely crushing over there at the Healing Home, your semi-new podcast, but you've been so consistent that it's not even all that new anymore. I've enjoyed the last Thursday streams you've been doing as well. So I'd love it if you would, promote anything that you're happy about that you've done recently, but also tell them about this Summer of Love series you've been on, because that's been very interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Chance. And what's up, everybody? Glad to be here as always. So cranking it out. We just continue to go full steam ahead, which has been fun. Right now, we are working on the Summer of Love series on last Thursday. So Mario and I have a show together. Every Thursday is last Thursday in our house. So we decided to go with the Summer of Love to dispel and jump into the 1960s. And mostly it was inspired by the mythos of Manson, because that's been one of my favorite rabbit holes to be down for a long time. And the 1960s I resonate with in a lot of ways because I grew up with parents that listened to a lot of music from that era. I always wished I had been able to be in that decade. But as I look back at things in hindsight now and the things what I know now, I know that there was a lot of weird stuff going on that we're just trying to expose a little bit more in our own way and talk about it from the standpoint that we know it. So it's been super fun.
And I say this like every episode, but don't let her looks deceive you. She's read like every Manson book out there. And so it's a huge passion of hers, and she's been wanting to talk about it for a little while. So we decided to dive into it. But I'm glad you're liking it, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, maybe with the exception of Taurus, you Earth signs, you got a plan for everybody you meet. Maybe you're not serial killers, but you know what you'd do if you had to. So not surprised that you're into the Manson literature. So let's just go around the horn and talk a little bit about what Cancer means to us as a sign. And I think we'll start with Emily.
Whoa, well, Cancer means a lot to
Big
me.
question.
I actually like the sign Cancer so much that I made it my business logo for my personal brand. Cancer is the energy in the zodiac that's ruled by the moon, right? And in the zodiac, we have this interesting phenomenon where the signs that are ruled by the sun and the moon are opposite the signs ruled by Saturn, which before we got on, Michelle was mentioning that she and Mario are a Capricorn Cancer duo, right? So they're the opposition of a Saturn ruled sign and a lunar ruled sign. And so when we get into Cancer, we see the raw light, which is light that is depicted through the essence of reflection, right? So the moon is a more reflective light source energy. And when you have lunar energy, you have access to the reflective light of conscious awareness on the earth plane, right? So that's the light of conscious awareness, which has been refracted and reflected through embodiment. And so this is the light that can manifest in myriad ways, right? It could be your new house. It could be your worst nightmare coming into manifestation. It could be anything, right? And so Cancer is the sign in the zodiac, which is depicted by the cardinal energy of water, which is the initiatory energy, which drives us into the thirst for life, right? This is why, we have this sort of energy that is directional and moving towards something. And it's not just moving toward life to experience life, although that's a big piece of it. It's moving toward life through what it cares about and what interests it, which is obvious when you think about the cardinal direction, right? Because when you go one way, you're not going all the other ways. So you're choosing a direction and you're moving toward what you most desire or what you most want to care for or nurture in your life. And so we see this interesting, and you'll see pop culture really ripping Cancer energy apart sometimes because they'll say, oh, they are vindictive and, vengeful. And you see that about both Cancer and Scorpio. And while those energies can be vengeful, the reason is when you really care about something, right? When it goes well, you care about it, you nurture it. But when people flip out and they enter into their, temporary crazy state that we all could enter at any given point, right? If you're upset enough, then they do sometimes dive into those darker timelines that are a bit more reaching out and vengeful or grasping, right? And it's because Cancer energy is the energy that grasps for life. Now, if the life is unlived or the life isn't satisfactory, the Cancer energy people will get like stomach aches, their chests will hurt, they won't be able to stand up straight. That can be a problem, but for the most part, Cancer energy is the energy of the mother, and not just the out there imaginary mother, but the primordial mother, right? The first one, and then your literal actual mother, right? And so whatever your relationship is with the person who birthed you. And then one more thing that I always like to remind people of, we are mammals, right? human beings are mammals. A lot of different animals are classified as mammals. The word mammal comes from the word mammary gland, which is ruled by Cancer. Of course, mammals, we have a couple different things like a diaphragm and, you know, whatever, and we give live birth. But the mammary gland is really the thing that they decided to name those species after because of the way that this energy works. So that's what I have to say about Cancer. That was a bit long-winded, but.
No, it's great. It's why we wanted you on the team. So one thing I've observed in Cancer season in my tuning work with clients is that there's a much higher likelihood whenever somebody has a session with me in this season that their main issue is going to stem to not just mother stuff, but in the womb trauma, which is very hard to identify unless you can kind of start to have somebody look at it and analyze the patterns with you and for you. So that's something I've noticed a lot of. Makes sense because that's, you know, Cancer is kind of like the cavity of the torso, you know, the opening inside of it. There's the cardinal water nature of the waters in the womb. You know, that's the first waters in many ways. I've noticed, you know, if I were to make a few quick observations about Cancer as a sign, it's that they are very interested in comfort a lot of the time, or nice things. Not always necessarily needing them to be like Taurian Taurus luxury goods, right? But nice, comfortable, cozy stuff, which is a womb-like expression. And I've noticed about them as well that they often command a lot of attention to be paid towards them. Not necessarily like in a baby, like they act like a baby, but almost in a sense, the way that babies just whenever they're present, all eyes kind of gravitate towards them. I've noticed Cancer people tend to have sort of a attention magnetism in that way too. Maybe not quite in the sense of a Leo where they take charge and they're kind of giving some orders while they've got the attention, but they do, you know, they're very fun. If they're comfortable and cozy, you know, they're very fun and sweet, good-natured type of sign, deep feelers. So those are some of my preliminary observations.
I got a few. Can I jump in?
Yeah, buddy.
So I was just thinking because I was on a walk the other day, and I went camping in this new part of the state that I haven't explored yet before. So just walking in this beautiful park. It's along the river near Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and there's this little stream that's coming down the side of the rocks, and I had a feeling, just like a feeling. I was like, I think that's a spring, and just I don't know the way that it was, the sound of it, the ripple of the water. I don't know what it was. But we walked a few more steps and there was a cave and there was like a little placard for the cave and it was talking about how this cave was built or was like used for storing beer and whatnot. And it was there because of the spring. So my instincts were correct about the spring. And so it made me think about the cardinality of directions and how we might be, what's the word I'm looking for? Imprinted with these certain directions for cardinal water, for cardinal air, for cardinal fire, and that it was just like registering somehow with me. I was really proud of my instincts. I was like, way to go! I should go take a sip of that water. And so when I was thinking about that for Cancer, I was thinking about the meaning of primary water, the first water sign coming up, bubbling up from the earth, having this like this innocence to it, as you were kind of describing what you were talking about there, Chance, with this lovely nature, this nurturing aspect to it as well. And
oh yeah, Cancerian energy is nurturing and likes to be nurtured. It goes both ways.
Right. And so we have this water aspect, but then in addition, there is the crab, which is got its armor. And then before the crab, your pendant reminds me of the previous ways of describing it, the scarab. It kind of looks like a scarab, your pendant. So scarabaeus, the crab, even has a similar sounding word. You can probably mix that up together, scarab to get crab. And so you have this outer shell, this protective layer. There's the water. There's this movement between protection and this flowing aqueous nature. And so that comes to mind, and that really did come to mind as I was picking out my herbs. And the other things I was thinking about too, my wife, she's nursing our son right now, or throughout throughout time, and just holding a child next to your bosom, and then what that could mean metaphorically for somebody like myself or you, Chance, to what we hold to our heart, what we're holding, what we're protecting, what we're dealing with while we're the discomfort of the squiggling nature of what we're trying to nurture as well. The bite marks and everything like that, the slaps you might get from
Headbutts.
It's not all lovey-dovey all the time. You know what I mean? There's a hardness that comes with nurturing at the same time that I think is worth exploring. And there was one last thing. Oh yeah, the constellations that are within the ecliptic of this are really, really cool. So to the south, we have Argus, which is the arc. And to the north, we have the Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the pole stars up in there too. So that's where I'll leave that one and see if anybody else has something to say about that. But that's what I was thinking about Cancer, those things.
Good stuff, man.
Awesome, dude. Emily, I love what you said about the raw light. There's so much esoteric information out there relating Cancer to light, the first light. This is expressed in Freemasonry. If people want to do follow-up research, Royal Arch Freemasonry, the top of the arch, that little wedge at the very top, the keystone oftentimes has the Cancer glyph in it, and there's light pouring through that keystone when it's removed. So there's lots of cool stuff about light and Cancer, absolutely. And even one of the esoteric names for the Chariot card is Lord of the Triumph of Light as well. So that lines up nicely. But for myself, real quick, the word emotion to me always comes around during Cancer season. Emotion, and then you remove the E and you have motion, and then you remove the M and then you have ocean. All of these concepts are so baked into Cancer and the Chariot card. It's completely nuts and crazy. So just thought I would throw that out there as well. Even with the Chariot card, which we're going to get into right now, right? The wheel, the idea of the wheel of heaven. Chakras being wheels, right? Wheels implying movement and journeying and all of these different types of things. And so here we have 3 different Cancer cards. This is the Marseille on the left, and then you have the Rider-Waite in the middle, and then you have the Thoth deck on the right-hand side. One of the things you're going to notice that's really fascinating is that there's a tradition of not showing the lower half of the Charioteer, and I've gotten into that in a couple of different videos. My understanding is there's this esoteric belief that I've picked up that the Charioteer perhaps is kind of a hybrid. And there's this Greek king, his name was Erichthonius, and he had serpent legs. And he invented the chariot, supposedly. This is the mythology, at least, right? There's several people who are credited for inventing the chariot. But he invented the chariot so that he can get around, and it was a dual-purpose sort of thing. It allowed him to travel, but it also covered up his legs. And so if you look at the 2 images on the left-hand side, you can see it's like, on the left especially, it's almost like he's behind a table, like he's in a booth or something like that at a carnival. And in the middle, you see that the Charioteer, he's actually fused into this cubic stone, which is related to the card as well. And so there's something to be said about all of this. And even, I think, Crowley with the card on the right-hand side, to me, I've speculated and I have wondered if his legs are supposed to be serpentine in nature, So that's kind of one thread that I've pulled at over the last few years that I think is really interesting. But the big thing that I always think about with the Chariot card is that there are these 4 posts around him. 4 posts or pillars, very much symbolic of the fixed signs, the cardinal directions. And I think that when I see this card, I tend to place the Charioteer in the middle of the heavens, in the middle of the cosmos, if you will. And I think that the star on top of his head in the Rider-Waite version is the North Star. And so this is the point in the heavens that everything revolves around. It's kind of a tradition with charioteer myths that the charioteer be pulled by maybe 4 horses, each one representing the 4 elements. That's kind of what Crowley's doing on the right-hand side. And he himself would be the 5th element. He would be spirit, or ether. And so kind of related to the human body, our head, right, is like the 5th appendage that controls all of the other limbs. And so I think there's metaphors with all of that you can kind of unpack and everything else. But yeah, the other thing I would say too that I think is really fascinating about the Chariot card is that there's also a tradition that pretty much implies that this chariot is actually not going anywhere, that it's immobile, that it's motionless. And so even if you look on the left-hand side, those wheels are sideways. So you literally cannot move. And then in the middle, or actually with all the cards, none of those animals are actually connected to the chariot. There's no reins, right? And so to me, it kind of implies like this inner movement, this inner journey. I kind of think of a whirlpool, or I think of a chariot wheel actually just kind of spinning, right? And that hub right in the middle is essentially stationary. And so to me, that's kind of a fun thread to kind of pull at and just consider this idea of a motionless chariot.
And without the reins being attached to the horses or the sphinxes or whatever they might happen to be, kind of makes me think of Cancer's position adverse to Capricorn. That there's something about the Cancerian energy that doesn't do well with authoritarian or like following someone else's rules. They can be sensitive to being reprimanded, by a Cancer or a Capricornian or Saturnian energy. I've found that there's, again, in this time of year with tuning people, that sometimes Capricornian themes come up adversarial, like knee stuff or issues with lead toxicity, things of that nature. It's good stuff though, Mario.
Awesome. Thanks, man. And then just related to Capricorn real quick, there is this old belief that Cancer was the gateway of man and Capricorn was the gateway of the gods. So we would come through Cancer, exit through Capricorn, which kind of relates to some of the Freemasonic stuff I was alluding to earlier. But there is this, from Freemasonry and from other places too, there's this idea that Cancer is at the top of like the firmament or the top of an arch or the top of a dome, which is why I think it's interesting that in the middle card, you have that arch on the top of the charioteer's head with that star, right? And so it's almost kind of like the hole or the point of pivot within the firmament, the dome of heaven. And so that's an interesting thing. Absolutely. So coming through that hole or portal, and then when we exit this plane, we're actually going through the ground is one way of looking at it. But
that shape is called a kyborium, and they have it in a lot of churches and cathedrals as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Exactly. But as Kyle was saying earlier, he mentioned Ursa Major and Ursa Minor being further north in the northern sky. And it's so appropriate to talk about because this is the 7th card of the major arcana, and Ursa Major and Ursa Minor each have 7 stars. And so to me, that is not a coincidence. Also, Ursa Major and Minor, the Great Bear and Little Bear, or the Big Dipper and Little Dipper, they've been known as wagons and chariots as well. So that's kind of this common sort of idea that they're very much related to the Wheel of Heaven spinning in the sky. So I think a lot of Wheel of Heaven symbolism basically is encoded into this card. And if there's going to be a point of pivot in the heavens, it would be the pole star.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we have, in addition to the solstice, which is, the summer solstice having that pivotal point atop the heavens in the like a heliocentric cosmology. We also have that polar portion as well. But we can make up calendars just like the Pope did or whatever, and in the sign of Cancer, it doesn't matter where you start your year. I guess if you start it with the solstice and the other solstice, or if you start it with the New Year's Day, within the sign of Cancer, I believe it's July 2nd is the day, which is equal 181 days or something like that, 182. That just came into my consciousness recently because of the weird esoteric psyop ritual submarine thingy, which was total charioteer magic in my mind. And somewhere in that story, there was like something about one of the guys going to like a Blink 182 concert, and I was like, why would that number be in there? So I just thought about that number, and wow, it's like right there in the middle of I think it's a couple days ago. So here we are, and also in that tilting point, if you will, where we have on one side one sphinx and another sphinx on another side. It's actually not moving anywhere. It's all moving above us. It's not actually going forward or backwards, as this a charioteer would suggest. I think that's really interesting.
Nice.
Maybe
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I just love everything you guys are saying about these chariot cards. I was wondering if I might add a bit about a couple of them. First of all, they all, as you noted, Mario, they don't have physical reins, right, to rein in the sphinxes or the horses. And the tradition actually teaches that the reins are invisible because the reins are controlled by the mind. The other really cool thing that I wanted to add to already the great information you guys were sharing is that unanimously in various traditions with various decks, they name this card the Chariot, not the Charioteer, even though the Charioteer appears to be the central character. And the reasoning behind that is that the chariot is actually of the utmost importance. And so what's hidden in the symbolism here is the symbol of Saturn, right, which is a cube, right? As well with the Rider-Waite, especially, and well, all of them have harken back to the Kabbalists, right? And so when we're looking at the cube of Saturn, we also have to look at the cube of space and that reasoning behind that cosmology, which if anyone doesn't know what the cube of space is, who's listening to us right now, it's a cube that shows the different pathways of the tarot to reach particular ends in your pathways of consciousness. So the chariot is there as the cube of space, but then we see even further that the charioteer, as you noted, represents victory, right? That's what these cards represent. The primary theme of consciousness is the capacity, and not the capacity even, but the inevitability of victory of the higher self. And so the charioteer is pictured as the higher self. We have all these wonderful, metaphors. I do yoga, so I love the Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita story where Krishna is the charioteer who gives the answers to the universe to Arjuna, the warrior that he is driving. But really, when you think about driving someone or something, you are in charge of that. And so it's the understanding that we are, in a certain sense, surrendered to the higher self. But in another sense, the Hebrew letter associated with this, and please forgive me because my Hebrew is not good. I think it's chesed. Am I saying that right? But the meaning of the Hebrew letter is fence, right? Enclosed space. And so when we look at that, and they've listed that in the Thoth deck that's over there on the far right, when we think about the fenced space, and we see the fence and the Rider-Waite, of course, with the white and the gray and the red roofs, right, which are showing us the nature between purity, embodiment, and desire, right? We have this idea of the closed off space or the enclosed space, which is the understanding of embodiment itself. And when you are birthed through Cancerian energy, you enter into this space, which is that Saturnian space of embodiment, structure, and limitation, right? Symbolized by the fence, the box, the chariot. But then we realize that anything is actually possible through the pathway of the suggestible influence of the higher consciousness into the lunar principle consciousness, which is the subconsciousness which builds and creates reality. And so I just wanted to throw that in, and also maybe mention that there's a lot of symbols of the unification of the masculine and feminine, also bringing up birth and embodiment and the unification of humanity beyond just the sexual act itself or the procreative act. And also, you guys were mentioning wheels and the Wheel of Fortune, and I don't spend a ton of time with the Thoth deck, but I love how in the Thoth deck there's this wheel here that the disc looks a lot like, well, not only do they call pentacles discs in the Thoth deck, right, throwing back to the earth element, but the disc there actually looks a lot like the Wheel of Fortune, whose planet association is Jupiter, who is exalted in the sign of Cancer, and who is exalted in the chakra associated with Cancer. So there's just so much cool stuff there. And that's what victory actually looks like on the yogic path, right? Is the awakening and opening in that Cancer associated space.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Yeah, actually, the creator of the deck, the Thoth deck, he says that that's a spinning wheel of amethyst, and that it's a spinning grail of amethyst, and that's a drop of blood apparently within that grail. So there's actually some holy grail symbolism, I think, attached to this card, which people who follow my work won't be surprised to hear me say that I associate that with the North. I think it's a polar symbol, the Holy Grail, but there's an inner correspondence with this as well, as is the case with all polar or northern symbolism that I point out. But yeah,
the
Go ahead.
Kyborium above the charioteer is that word is shared with the Eucharist vessel that is like a goblet or a grail. So
Nice.
in a way,
Yeah.
like it's dual symbol, that the idea of this four-posted, roof over the charioteer is also the idea of the Eucharist grail or bowl.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And then also, I just wanted to point out about the Hebrew letter, so meaning fence, right? I've also heard the interpretation of it being canopy, which is really appropriate, which is really interesting too, because it's like a traditional Jewish thing to be married under a canopy with 4 posts. So anybody can kind of Google that and check that out for themselves if they would like. And so it fits in line with the artwork here. But this idea of fence or canopy, it reminds me so much of the firmament. And so kind of going back to this dome of heaven or vault of heaven sort of idea or concept, I think that's ultimately, what they're showing with the fabric up top being supported by the 4 posts, which would be the 4 pillars that hold up the vault of heaven is kind of one way of looking at it, the 4 corners of earth, right? And then also kind of related to the Jewish thing too, there's a whole line of mysticism called Merkaba mysticism, which is essentially chariot mysticism. And it's this idea that our light body or etheric body is something of a chariot, pretty much, right? And that we travel within this chariot and we are the drivers of this chariot. But you're totally right. The power of the chariot itself over the charioteer, there's a lot to be said about that in and of itself, for sure. Good stuff.
Emily, you're just bringing the gravy. It's really so nice to talk to you. One of the things that you mentioned was the reins controlled by the mind, and it reminded me of. Let me just channel Gabe here for a second. The territories. So I live in an area that's liminal between Gemini in the Twin Cities and the Chariot Land, which is Detroit area. So just in that space as well is where Henry Wadsworth Longfellow depicts Hiawatha, the hero in the story, in the epic poem, the Song of Hiawatha. And there's this one little stanza here that I'd like to read. It goes like this: paddles none. He's making a canoe, but he's asking the birch and all the cedars and all these things of the canopy, by the way, to lay down their stuff so that he can construct a birch bark canoe. And it says, paddles none had Hiawatha, paddles none he had or needed, for his thoughts as paddles served him, and his wishes served to guide him. Swift or slow, at will he glided. veered to right or left at pleasure. And that just reminded me so much of those cards too. And thanks so much for bringing that up, Emily.
Beautiful. I have a deck where the Chariot card is called the Canoe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, actually, it's right here.
Can you?
Ooh, that's
cool.
perfect.
That is perfect.
Is that
We're
good?
definitely gonna we're gonna riff on
I
that
love
one.
it. I love it. So
What are those
cool.
animals on there? Are those geese?
They are. There's a bald eagle and some orcas, and is that a salmon? I think it's a salmon. I'm not a fisher.
The vessel.
And so I feel like it's always appropriate to bring up, but just to remind people, you know, the travel symbolism, there's so much overlap with the chariot, with the boat, with even the camel or the horse as well. And so these are all journey symbols. And from my perspective, one of the ultimate journeys is the journey beyond life after death. You know, and so a lot of ancient cultures have made a thing about associating these different vehicles, these different ways of getting around and traveling to the underworld and going to the other side, if you will. And so the chariot is definitely part of that tradition, and the canoe and the ship as well, for sure.
There's also a deep contemplation in these traditions about, and you hear human mothers talking about this a fair amount, or at least I do for some reason. But when you give birth to a human child, many people undergo a shift in their consciousness because they realize that by giving birth to a mortal life, they have just basically signed a guarantee of death. Does this make sense, right? Mortal birth, mortal death. You come naked, you go naked. And so there's this connection of motherhood, which is Cancerian in nature, we think of it with birth and with nurturing and with moving toward life, which is what it is, right? But on the other hand, there's an energy connected to the energy of death, right? Which is more associated with Scorpio. And we see that Scorpio is actually associated with regeneration and rebirth. But the very act of birth puts you on one side of this spinning wheel, right? In the life that guarantees the death. And you see that it's also like travel, but also being at home, right? Because Cancer is associated with the home. So it's almost like, are you at home anywhere you are, right? How did you wind up here in this life? What is home?
That's a really interesting point. And you also guarantee not just the death of the life you're bringing in when you have a child, that they're mortal, but death of all the life that is required to sustain that life. It makes me think of so we were just looking at those chariot cards, and the he or the het letter that is on there also looks like not just an archway, but a doorway, which I've heard being associated with the archway that the blood had to be painted on for Passover, to avoid the angel of death. You know, so that's very symbolic of what we're talking about here, that life requires some death to exist.
It's true. If you want to get into like what the charioteers are always wearing too, a lot of what the canopy symbolism is imparting on people is the understanding that the charioteer, and you'll see in the Rider-Waite, he has the victory wreath, and then he has the stars, and then he has the stars above him, the moons, the happy, sad moons, right? Tragedy, comedy, and then actually a brass, I think, is it brass or bronze? It's associated with Cancer there. But we see gold and silver as being really key to this, indicating both the lunar capacity and the solar capacity. But with those stars, it's indicating that all of the power coming in is actually cosmic power and cosmic forces, which is why it's not dependent upon the chariot or the human being to do all the work. You have to participate, of course, and let the charioteer stand in you. But as long as he's directing you, your victory is inevitable. Of course, these things look at a longer term goal, like multiple lifespans. So sometimes we fail along the way. But I always think about that and the nature of the metals that he's adorned with, as well as the colors that they've chosen for the sleeves and the canopies, because it's it's harkening back right to the High Priestess card, because they chose the High Priestess colors as the canopy. And of course, usually there's a river behind the chariot, at least in certain decks that you'll come across. And so you see the High Priestess's robe, which is all the water in the tarot, flowing right through this. And that's the boundary you have to cross, is the mastery in order to master and use the raw primordial esoteric water, right? And so
Excellent. I love it. The lunar solar thing, just real quick, Leo is right after Cancer, which is ruled by the sun. And so there's a lot to be said about the lunar solar connection with Cancer and the Chariot card. Absolutely. And then I really like your point regarding death too. And along my research travels, I came across an old quote that supposedly was mentioned in regards to charioteers in the chariot, but it's that the path of the chariot is the path of death. As kind of exactly what you're saying and what you guys are bringing up here. But here are some correspondences for Cancer from my elemental study packet. I don't know if we need to go through everything, but maybe if you guys want to study it. What do you think, Chance? Do you think we could just blow through these so we can get to the herbs?
Yeah, I think we can just blow through them. You know, the last thing I'll say about the path of the chariot being the path of the death, though, is in that interesting 180-degree relationship it has with Capricorn. The thing about a chariot is it feels like you've got freedom when you've got a car or a vehicle of some kind. But there's also the fact that that chariot can only run on predetermined tracks, or that canoe can only float on the river, and that river is only a road that it, you know, that it already is. You don't get to change. You don't really have the same amount of freedom as it might look like. You know, you have freedom within the confines of this course, and that course is the course of nature, the course of life, you know, birth, aging, death, all of that. So the frustration, I think, that Cancerian energy can sometimes feel at the being kept on the bounds of that track. But it's also for, you know, it's for the good ultimately, because things need to operate in a certain process.
Dude, absolutely. And this just reminds me too of the fact that the planets are on tracks as well, right? In their own way. And the luminaries have been looked at as chariots for a very long time. And so there are lots of examples of Saturn and Jupiter and all the planets basically being their own chariots, being pulled by the animal that they're most commonly associated with. And so to me, that's very, very interesting. So the stars and the planets have been likened to chariots for a very long time. And even their cycle has been compared to a wheel or a chariot wheel as well. So just thought I would throw that out there. But anyways, people can screenshot this if they'd like and study it. And then actually, I think there was another one before this, but maybe we just cruise through that real fast. It's no big deal, though.
Yeah, it's just the general water.
Yeah, 100%. So you get the idea. Lots of correspondences here. If people are interested in this, they can message me, and I can get it to them.
Yeah, let's break into some herbs. I think that as is tradition, we go about 45 minutes before we start actually talking about plants. Fun.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I'll start here. This is some linden. This is also known as basswood. Let me start the story. Actually, I was just a few minutes before we got on live. I was taking my dog for a walk. Just got back from this trip, right? And there was a big, huge storm here today, and lots of rain. Flood mythology is going to play into this weave here in a second, but blew off. This is all right. My town is just populated with linden. It's everywhere, and it just blew off all of these flowers, these linden flowers from the trees, and it was epic. It was so nice to see linden all around the ground. so that you can just like grab it like as much as you wanted like this and just harvest a ton of it just right on the ground and bring it back to the dryer. So that was really cool, just walking around barefoot on this linden before talking about it now. It's a tree, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful lunar tree. It is so because once the sun starts to go down, the flowers, the scent of the flowers are just, they have this intoxication to them. And if you're walking around, you're like, where is that coming from? And you might be looking this way, and you might be looking that way, but they're actually above you. And so it's like, it's this, it is a really interesting lunar thing where it's this omnidirectional type of presence where it's not like pointed, where you can narrow in on it like you can with a lot of other plants. And so I think of that sense in particular, like the way that a plant can smell has that lunar quality, and this one does for sure, especially because it has the signature for smelling better at nighttime. The flowers also have this moon cream color to them, and the whole flower is so you see the basic tree leaf, and then you see this like narrow leaf, and then you see like a bunch of little flowers that come off of that. And so that to me always looks like a little canoe. I always think of this as like a little passenger ship, if you will. That's how the linden flower appears to me. So it's really cool. And then, all right, the word linden, the word basswood, these are, and Tilia cordata, cordage, all of this is related to basket making. So this is a weavy plant. We can weave in many directions with this one. So yes, the reason why is because some wood is like trees are hard and some are soft, and some, like this tree, which is formerly a member of the marshmallow family, has a lot of mucilage and slime, which gives it this watery motion to it, but also this hardness, this hard component. So I have a demonstration of mucilage here. This is marshmallow, this marshmallow water powder that I put into some water. And as you can see, it becomes really, really, really viscous. And I got one cup to another here, and it just look how goopy it is. It's just like super duper goopy. So when I'm talking about mucilage, I'm talking about goo. I'm talking about a really structured water. A lot of these like interesting water structuring devices make the water gooey. When Jared Pollack is describing the fourth phase of water, when he's describing the exclusionary zone, he describes it as a gel. So when I'm thinking about the plants for Cancer, I'm thinking about plants that can become gelatinous in aqueous, like when you make them into an aqueous preparation, like a tea, or they are already in that suspended, the suspended state of like structure of that goo. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking about. Let's see, basket making, weaving, linden. The word linden is a really interesting word. That I think it can go in a lot of directions. It reminds me, I think that it's referenced in Lord of the Rings, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Chance?
In the Middle Earth map, the far like northwest region, that does seem to be corresponded to like where the UK would be, is called Linden. It's not really a major part of the actual storyline of the Lord of the Rings books proper, but yeah, it's in there. Linden, London.
London, right. So in this picture on the right,
there's tons of mythology about Linden also.
Is it the fairy or the elf realm? I mean, it's the elf realm.
No, well, yeah. It's elves living there. Yeah, they're like shipbuilders. They're sort of guardians of the gateway across the Western Ocean to the Undying Lands. Can't remember the name of the elf king, but you know, I'm pretty good though at Lord of the Rings lore.
I don't know if Tolkien was inspired by this or if this is just a green language thing that just kind of comes up. But in the picture on the right here, I'm showing there is a Tilia tree, or the linden trees are really famous for these little suckers that come out. So you have this big old massive tree. This is why I think this is going to be, I'm setting up some polar symbolism here. You got this massive tree in the center, and then all of these little suckers that start to move around it in a perimeter. And after a couple decades, 2-3 decades, that central pillar tree disappears and it's gone. It dies because all of the energy is sucked out from this peripheral suckers, right? And so now you have this like empty space, and there's all of these, and then the same pattern will continue. You have this ring, and then around those will multiply. And so an arborist taught me this, that there's this phenomenon called a linden ring or a linden circle, and I haven't been able to verify it because if you type in linden circle into Google, it's just got a bunch of like real estate listings for like a cul-de-sac or something like that. But basically what happens is you can walk into the woods at this particular, and there will be a circle of these trees as if it's like this council of trees, this circle of council of trees. And I think that is one of the reasons why in Germanic tribes and Germanic history, this tree has an association with justice. And in fact, there's like there's particular Germanic trees named after, or tilia trees that were the town's tree, like the tree in the center of the town, that all of the justice and the commerce and the the gavel would drop. Yeah,
this is in Dresden, Germany. There's a huge linden tree there that is potentially as old as 1,000 years. And here's an image of it from, well, no, this is from like 1840. But the oldest depictions of it in art are going back to like 1750. And it's so gnarly looking. Awesome. So if you're ever in Dresden, check that out. It survived the fire bombings, apparently.
That's awesome. So how polar is that? Like your central axis where you have your market, you have your justice, you have the decision between the cutting between the two parts of the year, all of these things Cancerian. And then above, right? And then below, as in below the ecliptic here in the arc, the Argos, everything's riding on this little, what looks like a little vessel, a little canoe. And so that's all really interesting external fun things that I love about learning about plants. When you take it into your body, though, when you make a tea with linden, it has that beautiful aromatic quality that I was describing earlier. Aromatics have this way of moving your mind, moving your senses. And in the case of linden, it is very dispelling of anxiety. It's comforting. That mixed with the mucilage, mixed with the soft amount of mucilage that it has, is really, really comforting to the chest, and not just the chest.
It flowers in July, right? It flowers in Cancer season.
It's flowering right now. It's right outside my door. And, well, they're on the ground now, thanks to the storm. Thor! But thanks for the harvest, Thor. It was really easy that way. I don't have to reach up. But yeah, this mucilage coming in, it's particularly fond of the lining of the lungs, particularly fond of the pericardium of the heart, of the stomach. This idea of like mucilage as a container of liquids is conducive to the Chinese model of where the spleen, which is another Cancerian organ over here on the left side.
And Kyle, in China, they don't have a Bodhi tree, so their Buddhism makes the linden tree the enlightenment tree.
Right, and you know why? Because the leaf looks enough like the Bodhi tree, so they're like, good enough. And that's why the Chinese use the linden tree as their holy tree, as their world tree. And and so in the spleen is representative of like containment containers, all this stuff, containing all these things. And so I love linden tea as a great cooling herb. It's a great cooling anti-inflammatory. It's cooling to the chest. It's cooling to the flu, diaphoretic. But also along with the idea of that, even in Italy, there's places where it's like planted in the center of the town. And if you have ever gone to like a town meeting or a town hall, I think it would be really, really wise for the preparers of the town to plant linden trees around, because it has this softening, intoxicating effect. And if you've ever gone to a town meeting, they're always like, if one more thing goes wrong, I'm gonna hang you, or I'm gonna bring you to the gallows or something like that. So people can get really pissed off. So it makes a lot of sense to have like, let's just soften them up a little bit, but also consuming this tea for something that you got to get off of your chest with emotion, not like the logical Gemini, I got something to say. There's other herbs that are better for that, and we can rewind a month and you can listen to that vibrant about that. This is more for that guiding, I have something to get off my chest that is emotionally, that I need to emotionally guard, that has this watery component to it as well. And
So you think it would help somebody that's maybe built up a lot of like plaque or unhelpful structure in the lungs around repressing sad type emotions?
Totally, because if you have the energy of hot that can like bake on the mucilage and bake on the waterous part of these parts of our body that like to be wet, right? So if there's a component of heat, that could also be emotionally like anger, not being able to say, or it could be the lack of that flow. Let's say again, like the spring that's flowing forth, like bring a little bit more movement from that spring because of the mucilage. So I was having a little meditation today at 4:20 precisely, and don't get any wild ideas. It just was funny to me that it was at 4:20. But
well, you do have long hair.
I was thinking about I was taking bong rips of linden tree, and anyway, I was thinking in my mind about the muco lining, the linings of our gut, all of our mucous membranes, and how they are the mediator between our microbiome, this like other world, and then like what we bring into our body, what we bring into ourselves, passing through our second gut in the stomach, passing through as we inhale like this, the air also has to like move through this aqueous layer that's protecting the lungs. It has to, emotions have to move through this aqueous mucilage that is in order to get into our heart space. And so I was thinking about, what about the word instead of the mucous membranes, what about like Moses membranes, where it's got this like mediator component to it, instead of like the mucopolysaccharides or mucilaginous herbs. I'm going to start calling them moselaginous herbs because they have that way of helping with the mediation between the two worlds. And so, yeah, this is the plant that
That's
also...
interesting. So here's how Tolkien used it. In a way, can I just tack on? You wanted me to bring in Tolkien, right?
I wanted you to bring in Tolkien. Bring it.
Okay, so he had this poem that was titled something about the leaves of the linden tree, and he wound up repackaging that poem and making it part of a larger epic poem called the Lay of Luthien, or the Lay of Beren and Luthien. So if you remember in the Fellowship of the Ring, when they're Aragorn and the hobbits are around the campfire and he starts like singing a song about an elf princess and they're like, what happened to her? And he's like, she died. But that song is about, going between the worlds, the elf princess and the human hero man having a Romeo and Juliet type story. But so there's one way that Tolkien worked in the linden leaf, in that symbolism was a part of that poem or that lay.
So I've been to, what's it called? The Stone Circle in Avebury in England. And this is where Tolkien did a lot of his, their claim is like, this is where he sat and did all of his writing. And so because of that, there's this tree that a lot of people visit, and they call it a wishing tree. And this tree, it's a group of trees. It's a group of like 2 or 3 trees, and they have this epic root system and everything like that. And it's on the hill, and there's the stone circles. There's all the sheep. Those are linden trees. So it has this. I know that when Tolkien was doing some writing, he was inspired by the linden because he was sitting under one. So I think that's really cool that you brought that into it as well.
Good stuff, man. So. Other comments, guys?
I'm so thrilled that you brought up something related to marshmallow, because I'm not an herbalist, but for some reason, when Chance emailed me and asked me about this, I was like, I wonder if we'll talk about marshmallow because of its soothing effect on the stomach. And because at one point I was in like a tarot thing, and there was a woman there who was an herbalist, and she had an herbalism tarot deck. And I remember she pulled a card and I was like, I know what that card means, but why is it marshmallow? And
Spoiler alert, marshmallows in the slides later.
Well, you said linden was connected to marshmallow, and then you
are,
showed
yeah.
this marshmallow in your glass, and I was like, I wonder if we're gonna have a marshmallow time. So I just was personally tickled.
Get your skewers ready, folks. We're gonna. There's some more marshmallow on the way.
Nice. You know, I love all the stuff that you're bringing, Kyle. And the linden tree, I always think of bees when I think of linden, because when in our old neighborhood, there was a huge linden tree. And in the summer, in July, when I would walk past it, that thing was just filled with bees, like to the point where you're underneath it and it's so calming. They're very calming in their nature, their vibration that they put out. And so it's really interesting to me that they're so attracted to the linden. And you would like look up and it was like a colony of bees, and it was actually really stunning. And so it goes along with like kind of the enlightenment thing, levitation, I think of. And I love the softening that comes with linden, like you were saying, the opening of the emotional side of things. So, and this is a lovely herb. It's great for tea, but it's also great as an herbal infusion. So like steeping it for a longer time. So when you make an infusion, the difference between that and a tea is literally just the steeping time and the amount of herb that you're using. So taking 1 ounce of linden to 32 ounces of water, steeping that for 4 to 8 hours, and then straining it and drinking it. And you're going to be getting like a really, really strong infusion that you can, drink over the course of like a few days or something. You could use it as a wash for your skin or your hair, or, you could use it to anoint certain tools that you're working with, something like that. So I had to bring up the bees with this one because that's like one of my fondest memories of walking in our old neighborhood in the summer was going to the linden tree and then smelling it and then seeing and hearing and feeling the bees.
Also, we had s'mores the other night.
We did.
That is all.
The bees are, that's the other way to find it. Where's that smell coming from? And then you could find the bees. If you find basswood honey, that's what linden honey is. It's basswood honey. And of course, we can't get away from you opened up a can of bees on that one. We got to talk about the beehive asterism, which is in the sign of Cancer. And so that's really relevant too, obviously. So the bees as muses in Greek mythology, as these intermediaries between worlds as well. They have like a mercurial aspect. They go into their little hole. What's going on in there? It's a whole nother city. And they're buzzing around. But bees, as we know, they have like the Cancer the crab. They have their exoskeletons. They have their weaponry that if you get too close to their mother, their matriarch, but they also have this nurturing aspect, the sweetness that might even be the nectar of the gods itself, right? The honey, the nourishment, the thing that adds that nourishment to the tea. And so great point with Michelle bringing up the nourishment of linden. That's, to me, that's the best way of working with linden, is just making a tea, like you said, an infusion, something that is going to bring out that nutritive aspect and nourish your skin, nourish your bones, nourish your gut, nourish your lungs and your emotions and all that stuff in particular. So thanks for bringing that up.
Right. And to your point, just real quick, that wedge, the keystone wedge in the middle and the top of the arch of the Royal Arch, sometimes has the Cancer glyph inside of it. Sometimes has the Hebrew letter that we were just talking about, chet. Sometimes it has an actual little beehive inside of it as well. And I think it's alluding to that asterism that you just brought up, which is pretty cool.
A couple of mythological...
Sorry, go ahead.
A couple of mythological appearances of linden. One that I think is the most interesting is in the story of Siegfried from the Germanic tales. He is basically like the Achilles of their mythological cycle. And if you recall, Achilles is invulnerable because of being dipped in the river or dipped in something. I can't remember exactly what, but he's dipped in something that makes him invulnerable. But just his heel is still sticking out, so that's his weak spot. Siegfried has a similar thing happen. He's bathed in the blood of a dragon to gain invulnerability, but he did not realize he had a linden leaf stuck to his body, and that was the spot where the blood didn't touch. So he has a vulnerability point. I think that's kind of, fitting and interesting in the Cancerian part of this because, invulnerability, the shell, the crab shell, that's all in the mix. Many people are also turned into linden trees in mythology that I could find. Ovid makes a story about that where Bacchus and Philemon, not Bacchus the god, but they're characters that were just mortal humans, a couple, and the female of that couple was turned into a linden tree after Zeus and Hermes were visiting their village somewhere in Phrygia, and they were the only ones who showed hospitality or like nurture or gave comfort, right? So she gets turned into a linden tree for that. And interesting point from Herodotus that he says the Scythian magi would wrap linden leaves around their fingers to do their laying on hands, their hand waving and magic hands, jazz hands, juju. And then finally, the last one I could look up was regarding Chiron, the wounded healer. His mother, much like Adonis's mother, turned into a tree after giving birth to him. And I think Chiron is a older savior archetype, older solar, like son of God type deity that then got sort of shifted mythologically later on by the Greeks, but very interesting.
And we had a president named Lyndon too.
Oh yeah, weird one.
Lyndon B. Johnson, was he the one who would call his staff in while he was pooping? Do you guys know this story?
No.
He was proud of his anatomy, and so it was like a power move to intimidate his staff. I think this was in his biography. I didn't read it, but
Google search confirms. Weird power move.
Anyway, that's all I know about him. That's the president.
That's a great legacy.
Yeah.
Lyndon B.
Oh man, we got a lot out of the Linden though. That was good.
Well, and here we are with another tree, willow. And, Kyle bringing up the flexibility of the linden and it being used for weaving. Willow is famously known as a weaving tree. So you can make all sorts of stuff from willow. Brooms and baskets, tools, great for making fencing actually as well. So there you go with the fence again, creating that shell, creating some sort of boundary. Willow, this one here, this is a weeping willow, but there are a lot of different types of willows. But I chose this photo just because of how close it is to the water. It's almost like wanting to dive in. And willows, one of the things about them is that they do love water so much that, if you have a willow tree like in a city, sometimes it can cause problems because they'll actually seek out water pipes and things like that. And it's even happened where the roots will maybe like bind themselves around a pipe and it's almost like they energetically know there's water in there or something, or perhaps they could crush the pipe with their roots, not entirely sure about that. But with the whole water thing going on, these trees are actually prone to rotting, and so a lot of times they'll rot actually from the inside out. And it's really interesting because we actually have a willow that's right next to our house, and that exact thing is happening to it. And one of the things with willow too is that it's usually associated with death and rebirth. So it's kind of interesting that it has this tendency to be in these underworld sort of realms, the realm of death, the realm of rot, the realm of water, which is very intuitive and changing and flexible. And that's another like doctrine of signature with the willow, is that it's flexibility. And that can go into the medicine of it too, because a lot of times it's used to reduce inflammation. And then up on the screen, you can see I labeled it witch's aspirin, because that's actually a nickname for it. And a lot of people know that willow is kind of the original aspirin. And I believe it's pronounced, yes, it contains salicin. So the salicin is what is actually bringing the pain relieving aspects to everything. And the Bayer company actually did use willow originally to create aspirin. So it's just kind of interesting, an interesting weave too of just how the pharmaceutical companies are always after the plants. It always goes back to the plants usually, and the trees. And this is where they're finding these remedies. And so that's just something to keep in mind with it. It's a diaphoretic, and what a diaphoretic is that is an herb or a tree or a plant that will make you sweat. Or if you have a fever and you're wanting to encourage the fever so that you can, move through it, willow could be a really good ally for that. And it was brought to my attention, the word ally has been like hijacked by like the liberals. So I'm trying my best to not use the word ally. To me, it makes so much sense for plants, because I look at them as friends, and I look at plants as people and, someone you can hone a relationship with. So excuse me if I always call them allies, but great ally for that. So, and the bark is typically used of the willow, but the leaves can also be used too. And there's an astringency to both of those. One of the things that's really cool that I actually just learned when I was preparing for this is that willow leaf foot baths are sometimes used for mothers, and it's actually a way to help initiate them into motherhood. And I think that probably goes back to perhaps what Emily was talking about with that contract they sign with, it's like you're bringing in life, but you're actually guaranteeing death in its own way. And I think the willow kind of has this initiatory sort of thing going on with that. And also just really a nice ally to work with for intuitive and psychic work, because I think you're working with that water element, you're going inward, you're going to the underworld, and that's where a lot of these sorts of psychic, intuitive times really ramp up for a lot of people. Sorry. Go ahead. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was curious because I have a lot of willow, but not a weeping one in my yard. And actually, I had to film a woman who is she's a ethnobotanist, and she had in her yard done live weaving of willows to form this huge fence with this big archway to walk through in her property. It was amazing. So there's the fence theme again. But I was curious because I love looking at the willows back there, and I did have a problem with roots in a pipe. So when you said that, I was giggling over here. But is it just the weeping one that you can use?
No, actually, most all willows have the pain. All of them do. Some of them are stronger. Most people know the white willow as like the strongest pain, the one that has the strongest pain relieving properties. That's the one I work with the most. But all of the willows do have the same quality. All of them contain the salicin that you can make into pain relieving medicine for sure. And I really love doing it as an infused oil. A tincture is great though too. The tincture can be wonderful because for more acute pain, I find willow is wonderful for a woman's monthly cycle as well. If you have painful cramping, willow is like kind of a bedside tincture for me during that 5 days because you just never know, but it can kind of take the edge off of a lot of different types of ailments. And so, yeah, you can use all of them. Real quick question
for the panel. Do you think cancer struggles with flexibility? Like the sign?
like struggles with it in terms of like, because the water is flexible, like they might have a hard time, like they might have to work harder to be flexible?
I mean, physically flexible, maybe. Emily would have a good answer to that, but like, you know, they might be not always able to sort of redirect themselves that easily. It's kind of my thinking. That willow being a very flexible plant, interesting how it seems to associate with Cancer pretty powerfully, even in the mythology. Just a question for the panel: do you think that Cancerian people struggle to be physically or emotionally, or flexible in general?
It's not a fixed sign; it's a cardinal sign, so it does have that directed energy towards it. So it's not like it's going back. It's not going back like a mutable sign would. So that's the only thing that comes to mind for me.
That's an interesting question. It's really funny. I'm a Cancer, right? My birthday wasn't too long ago, and one time on Facebook years ago, I, for whatever reason, looked at everyone's birth dates, and all of the Cancers I did not get along with. I'm like, you're a bump on the log. You're not cool. I don't really care for you. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, is that what people think about me? But one way I'm thinking about this is that I've heard that Cancerian type people, because we're more so homebodies and we have this shell, we like things to be done a particular kind of way. And we like to kind of like adventure out and bring things into the home, bring things into our little nests, if you will, or your bedroom or whatever. And so I feel like that creates a certain kind of comfort that some Cancers, when outside of their comfort zone, don't really care for and don't really like. And so that's something to keep in mind. Perhaps this is kind of speaking towards what you're talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would second that sort of thing for sure.
I would say, can I just say physically also for Cancers? So they'll be very flexible until they're not. So they will not be flexible on the thing that they've decided they're caring about and they're going for. In the body, it sometimes manifests as certain things being constricted because certain things are too loose, right? So the non-engagement of a particular area through the idea of comfort, of nesting, of taking care of yourself, of going within, right? And then the stiffening of the oppositional point. And so a lot of Cancerian people, they need to find that balance, and they'll sometimes, if you talk to someone with strong Cancer, not just one or two things, but a bunch of Cancer energy in it, in their chart, you'll see that they are like soft and supple in certain areas, and they are constricted, tight, or bound up in the opposing areas. And they will have favored and like babied one piece of them and allowed the other side to get the work on, which is very similar to the Cancer Capricorn spectrum, right? Capricorn being energy of work and Cancer being energy of nurture.
There's a couple stories that come to mind. One is the fisherman who is out fishing one day, and he looks at the fisherman next to him, and he's got a bucket full of crabs there. And one of the crabs is about to get out, and he's just like, he's out on the bucket. He's like, hey, buddy, you better watch that crab right there. He's going to jump out. And he's like, hold on just a second, just watch. And all the other crabs will pull that crab back down. They don't want that crab to get out. So there's that comes to mind, and also the way the crabs move laterally. I don't know if that's relevant to the question. But going back to the willow, another thing that comes to mind too for me is this, and also returning to the idea of like tracking water. There's a Native American story about Coyote, the trickster, always getting into trouble, always making the story move along, basically. And one day, I don't know, like a dung beetle, like a scarab, pushing the something up the hill. I don't know what he was pushing up the hill, something that he stole probably. And he gets to the top of the hill and he trips over a log, and he falls back down and he hits his head on a cottonwood tree, which is a member of the Salix genus. and then he falls back, and he keeps falling, and he hits his head on a poplar tree, another member of the Salix genus. And then he keeps rolling down the hill, and boom, finally hits his head on a willow, and then splash into the water. So what that story illustrates is that there's 3 trees that are indicating the presence of water. And where you see willows, especially if you're on top of a hill or something like that, that's where that's where the stream is down there. Especially sometimes the canopy obscures it and you can't really see where that water is. But willow will grow by rushing water. It will grow by water. It likes to, as Michelle was saying, it has any of these plants that are in this genus Salix, they have this regenerating quality where they can fall over on account of their flowing nature and spring back up and grow back up. No other tree can fall down, a gigantic tree can fall down with its roots exposed and live again. But the willow and the cottonwood and the poplars can. And so with that in mind, you could take a little bit of the bark and you could put that into your cut flowers, or you could put that into your rooting solution for your garden and get something to bring its roots back as well. And I love that idea of the willow leaf bath for the tea, or for your feet, for the same reason, because you're kind of establishing new growth, new roots, especially as a mother. That's brilliant. That's beautiful.
Yeah, great points. Oh, I love that. I didn't think about the establishing roots through the feet, but yeah, that is brilliant. That's awesome. And one other thing that I thought of before we move on with willow is that on the underside of the willow leaf, it's very silvery and like has a whitish color to it, which is usually an indication of correspondence to the moon. So mugwort is like that too. That's like one of the ways you can identify mugwort, but it is one of the ways you can identify a willow. And if you're ever in an area where there are willow among other trees and the wind is moving the leaves, you can usually see that silvery flicker, and it's an indication of a willow. And I always love that little like tidbit of beauty about the willow and the connection to the moon.
There's definitely moon willow connections in the mythology too. So Hecate, first of all, underworld goddess of the Greeks, she's a moon oriented goddess and was symbolized with willow. And then there's Zeus's nurse, who he was is like a water nymph who raised him on Mount Ida. And her name was either Ide or Helisi or Heliki, which I think is cool that that word actually apparently is related to the willow, the word for willow in Greek. There's also Orpheus with willow branches on his underworld adventure. He carried them with him, and Apollo's lyre was made of willow. Interestingly, that harps and willows were carved from harps and lyres were often carved from willow. And so, it seems like this willow relating to Cancerian energy goes back pretty far, because if Cancer is related to like mother and nurture, and then now there's these priestesses that are using water magic and willow together in their witchcraft, and that their muse was Heliki or Helisi. It seems like it's been a moon Cancer mother magic thing to use willow for that type of thing for ages. What also interesting is that there's a ancient Greek city-state called Heliki that was submerged by a tsunami a few hundred years before the birth of Christ. So those are all things in the mix when we're talking about willow, since that word Heliki is a word related to willow.
I got a willow weave coming up. All right. The movie, I just thought of this. The movie Willow. The guy that plays Willow in that movie, his name is Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis. And he has another fun little fact. He was in every single Star Wars movie. Do you know why? Because he plays R2-D2 And R2D2 is like the lunar aspect to the Apollyon C3PO, if you will. So I don't know. That just came to mind. I thought that was pretty cool since we're talking about Willow, the guy that we also know, the guy that we know as Willow in his masked form, in his by night form, I guess you could say, is the moon, little moon archetype, doing his own little thing in the Star Wars show.
Never thought of C3PO that way, but he is a droid of eloquence. So he fit right into the Logos deities.
I got that from Gabe's Enneagram of the Star Wars that he presented on your show a while ago. That was in the membership hour.
I'm glad you got good stuff out of that. That's a fun show. They all start to blur together. Let's move into the already aforementioned marshmallow. Cool.
Nice.
Haven't we talked marshmallow once before?
I was wondering that. I was thinking, I asked Michelle, did we talk about marshmallow? All right, here's where marshmallow would be relevant. It's Venusian, for sure. It's got those 5 petals. It's very soft. It's very watery. It's very delicate and beautiful. So maybe we talked about it in Taurus. It's also salty, and it's got a mineral saltiness, sweetness to it that is diuretic and particularly it really likes to go to the kidneys. So I was thinking maybe Venusian, maybe Libra. This would make a lot of sense. I think a lot of I bet you Culpepper, that guy who's all about assigning herbs to planetary bodies and everything like that. I bet you he's like making a really strong case for Venus and marshmallow. That's fine. I'll agree with that. I'll give that. I'll say it has both Venusian and lunar qualities. If we could only take that illustration of those leaves and flip them on the other side, we would see that soft argenta, that soft silvery moon blossomness that Michelle was mentioning earlier, that is present with willow, that's present with artemisias that come to mind. So that to me is a real strong signature for the moon. And of course, it's got this white flower. It doesn't have much of a scent. It doesn't have much of a scent at all. And so Venusian herbs to me have a beauty all around. They have a beautiful bloom. They have a beautiful feeling in the body. They make you feel yourself, but they also have a scent to them. And this one doesn't. So I'm like, that's another one for the moon. And it's really, really, really mucilaginous, mucilaginous plant. And so these mucilaginous plants, watery plants for sure. So that's why I think marshmallow is a great one for Cancer in this sign as well. Let's see, it would be blooming right about now. It has this affinity for Cancerian parts of the body, but really anywhere there's mucous membranes, in the side of the nose, inside of the sinuses, in the throat. I'm drinking it now so that I can talk. Inside of the lungs, around the lining of the gut in particular, bringing that stuff. It's like prebiotics. Whenever you're working with an herb that has a mucilage to it, you're nourishing your gut flora and hydrating yourself constitutionally, hydrating yourself acutely. In the case of marshmallow, it's a great. There's plants that are constitutional hydrationer. There's plants that are acute hydrationers, and marshmallow, which has got a little bit of both because of its nourishing, its sweet flavor, because of its salty flavor, because of its slimy mucilage, because of its a lot of those reasons. So it's the root of marshmallow, and this happens because if you don't know, I have an herb shop here in Milwaukee, and at least once every other week or something like that, it's usually the boyfriend who's just like walking around the herb shop, just like killing time. What's this? What's that? And then picks up the jar of bulk herbs that says marshmallow. That's a plant. Look at that. So a lot of people don't know that marshmallow is a plant, but that's because we have this this abomination that they sell now that has like all kinds of crazy crap in it and corn syrup and whatnot. But what started out as something similar, which was you took a marshmallow root, dried it, you powdered it, you whipped it up with some water, maybe an egg white, maybe a little bit of some sort of gelatin or something like that. You either put it in the oven on a low temperature and bake them, or you just let it sit out and harden. And you can cut them up, and you get these little confectionery things. And the purpose of them was to chew on them if you had a sore throat, or if you had a tummy that was too hot. You had a constitution that was too hot and damp. This would be there's a condition called monsoon diarrhea, which is if you're like a hot person and you have there's a lot of dampness in the atmosphere, this would be a really good mediator for that. But yeah, that's what marshmallows used to be. They used to be these little confectionery herbal treats, and now they're not. But nowadays, people are bringing them back. It's easy to find a recipe online to make your own old-fashioned marshmallow. Of course, I could go on and on. The whole part of the plant is medicinal. The leaf is less mucilaginous, and the flower is too. But the root is very, very, very slimy. And the name Althea is interesting to me. I know that there's some Greek myths about that somewhere in there. It reminds me of Athena, and so that's another reason why I was thinking Venusian stuff too. But I don't know. Of course, marshmallow, I think it's just such a beautiful plant. It's such a great plant for just about anybody, and especially in the summertime, in the hot summer sun, where you might feel a little parched and in need of this kind of like gooey water that just kind of soaks into your body over time. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, this is great. My apologies if we did do marshmallow. I couldn't remember 100%. I didn't think we did, but maybe we did. But this lines up perfectly with the moon, in my opinion. You know, another thing with the marshmallow, for anyone who's into herbal hair care, marshmallow is wonderful for your hair. You can even make like pseudo like gel for your hair using flax and marshmallow. Really nourishing. You know, you're gonna really restore it, bring moisture. It's gonna protect the hair too. So you can use powdered marshmallow root and you know, make yourself like a slurry, kind of like what Kyle is drinking. But you can thicken it to the point if you use flax, because flax has that same mucilagenic property, and those together make a really nice natural hair gel that is really, really safe and effective, and all the beautiful things that come with herbal hair care.
Althea. It's kind of like, you know, Al or El, God, and Theos, God, the God. I don't know. That's in there though. Yeah, I don't remember when we brought up marshmallow, but it's definitely not ever bad to revisit the qualities of it in the season where it's effective.
Yep. If I did bring it up before, well, let me amend it. I think it's more Cancerian.
Well, as the guy who could spend an hour talking about any one of these things by himself and not run out of steam, I'm sure we didn't cover even all the bases with it.
Right. Well, one of my memories too of you, Kyle, is when you guys were in Italy. I feel like you did a video about marshmallow, because I remember you were under the weather. You did a video. It's on your YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. And you just showed people like being able to just eat the leaf, you know, if you were having hoarseness or something like that, and it's going to create that mucilagenic property. I'm not sure if you remember that, but I'm pretty sure that was something you did in Italy.
It's a really common plant all around, and it's this one is the marshmallow, but there's all kinds of Malvaceae plants, and including the linden. Another one that this one looks like hibiscus. Hibiscus is another Malvaceae plant, and so hibiscus has very similar qualities. All of them do. They're all soothing, cooling. They're gonna cool down your hot body. Yep.
Emily, you look like you want to jump in on something.
No, I'm just so thrilled to be learning about marshmallow. I mean, I love it. There are a lot of traditional marshmallow makers, not a lot, but a fair number around these parts. And I remember having to review our Hops and Heritage Festival in Oregon, which, if you don't know, we used to be the hops growing capital of the world, and they were having like marshmallow demonstrations. And so that, in a previous life, that was part of my job one year, as I got to go to the Hops and Heritage Festival. And I don't know what I did. Did I write a report or a grant? Who knows? But there were good marshmallows. So just stoked to be here.
We're happy to have you. Very good. This one's very magic.
It is. It's pure magic, in my opinion. This is one of the more magical plants that actually we're lucky enough that Lunaria here grows really, really strongly around us. We have a lot of it every single year in our backyard. And this is one of the types of plants that's self-sowing. So it produces seeds, and the seed pods are actually where the name Lunaria comes from, or sometimes it's known as moonwort, because if you actually just flip to the next slide really quick, we can go into that doctrine of signature. And so here you're looking at the seed pod of the Lunaria plant. And so a lot of times you see this in dried flower arrangements at like craft shows or craft fairs or what have you, because it's something that once it's dried, and if you keep it nice and you don't toss it around a lot, it will stay like this for the foreseeable future. And so they're really gorgeous. And you can see, I love this photo because it demonstrates kind of like the life cycle of the seed, how you see the two that are in the front there, kind of like a darker color, and then they end up becoming more that silvery moon-like color towards the end of their life before they're about to fall off. And so if you have one money plant near you in your area, you can bet that you'll have more and more and more each year, which is one of the cool things about it, which kind of goes along with the weave of abundance, you know? So we're talking about a money plant. And so you have all these they're seemingly like silver coins. And I've actually mistaken them for coins before, like being in the woods and then like walking and seeing one of these seeds and going, whoa, is that a coin? And then you look and, oh no, it's just a money plant seed. So, and Kyle was the one that brought to my attention that sometimes they're known as Pope's coins. And I think you were saying, Kyle, that isn't that traditional in Italy, that's where that came from?
Yeah, they're called Medaglia di Papa. That's the currency of the Pope, I guess you could say, Pope's coins. The medallion also is also the name. Yeah, really cool. That's just the not the botanical name, but the common name they call it there.
So then if you kind of go back to the other slide, I feel like there is the purple color. You can also find these in white. Sometimes the flowers can be like more of a pink color than this purple. But I don't know, there's something also lunar about the color of the purple to me. Because I just feel like there's like a kind of a sunset sort of darker sort of purpley nature, softness to a moon. So I think it's just so beautiful. It's captivating too. And the stems here, if you look at it, you can see that there's like purple, kind of like purplish red color in there, which can sometimes indicate, as we've talked about before, that it could be helpful for moving like stagnation, maybe stagnant blood. This is a mustard family plant. And so there is movement that comes from that. Even the seed pods themselves can be eaten when they're actually green, because the first stage of the seed pod, it'll turn green, then it'll turn that kind of other darker color, and then the silver color. But when the seed pods are fresh, you can eat the seeds, the actual pod itself, you can eat the leaves, and you can also eat the flowers. So this plant is entirely edible as well, which is really nice. And it has a mustard sort of spicy flavor to it. I also think of like transformation when I think of this plant because of the element of money and currency and the movement. And I know that Mario and I were talking about how, Mercury is also associated with money. But I can't not think of Moony, like Moon Day. And so this plant just really has a lot of that energy there. going back to the mucilage, the seeds actually, if you were to pull apart those pods, there are the seeds inside of there, and you can use the seeds as medicine. So the seeds, like we were talking about, if you activate those with water, you put them into water, you make a tea or something like that, you are going to get a mucilagenic liquid that you can use for your skin. This one is really great for inflammation. So kind of that Cancerian nature of the outer shell, protecting the outer shell with the mucilage of the Lunaria plant seeds. And you can actually make like poultices with it. You can powder the seeds, and you can use it in that way. I also just recently learned too that there's like an oil that's actually secreted from the seed once water hits it as well. So there's just more of that water energy of water being the activator for a lot of the herbs that we're talking about, or water being the thing that draws something out of them. Just like with the linden, it's like, okay, it's going to calm you to the point where you're going to be able to maybe draw something out of yourself that's been, sitting on you heavily. And I always notice too the heart-shaped leaf of the Lunaria plant, and to me, it brings up like that there's an element of emotional support again, something that it's one of the first flowers that comes up in the spring. So there's like that spark of beauty after a long winter. And then you see this beautiful heart-shaped leaf. So it's almost like kind of encouraging you to get your emotional juices flowing, allow things to breathe, allow things to flow a little more. And yeah, that's Lunaria. I feel like I could wax poetic on this one a little bit longer because it's like I've had so many great connections with it. And also, too, for those people out there who like to, work with intention, which I think most of the people that hang out around all of us are into that. This is a great plant to work with if you are wanting to encourage wealth to flow to you. You're wanting to work like in a kind of an abundance mindset. Maybe you're trying to, at least for me, it took me a long time to actually start to understand the way that money actually wants you to work with it. And it wants to be exchanged, it wants to move, it wants to flow. And so I think that Lunaria could be a good plant for people to just, work with if you're trying to learn the ways of that and be more comfortable with it. Because I think just a lot of people, I can speak for myself at points in my life where money kind of was scary to me because I was in a scarcity mindset. And so Lunaria is a plant that can help somebody get out of the scarcity mindset and to just realize that there's beauty. Like, it can be a beautiful thing. It's okay to want to make money for yourself so that you can sustain or do the things you want to do. Because there's always a lot of stigma around, down with capitalism and this and that. I'm not a capitalist by any means, but if you're working in the system that we live in, you end up realizing that you have to build a healthy relationship with money if you're going to want to, move around and do the things and figure it out and have a healthy relationship with it,
The analog here in the Midwest and through the East is another very similar looking one, and it's called Dame's Rocket is the common name, and the botanical name is Hesperus matronalis. So there's the Hesperid, this is the garden of Hesperides, Hesperus matronalis, this mother-like, and it's another purple mustard, tall, blooms around middle of June or so, and unlike the Pope's coin, it has the typical mustard seeds that are like pointing. I don't know, they look more like antennas, I guess you could say. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there for.
They call that one a aggressive invasive species.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They say cut the mustard. That's what they say.
But yeah, something like that, an aggressive invasive, if you will, definitely, so much seed that it drops off, it does symbolize the idea of abundance, of a windfall. You were talking about, Michelle, how water can activate certain things in these plant medicines, and I had just run over to the other room to get this hydrosol that I got from Kyle. It's rose and peony. So I don't know how you intend this to be used, but what I have discovered the use for this for myself to be is if I'm ever feeling like my eyes are starting to get a little burned out from screens, they're like literally drying and burned, or tired from this, or like, feeling like there's a little droop in the under the eyelids, or just my like face tired. That feeling, everyone knows what I'm talking about. This rose hydrosol that I got off of your site, man, I spray that on my face and I feel like I just woke up. It's sort of the effect of splashing cold water on your face, but it's much more enjoyable and much more powerful. So it's a really good thing. Not really maybe on topic, but a little advertisement for your shop. People go check out the hydrosols.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I love distilling. I love that kind of stuff. Hey, would you do me a favor? Will you bring up an image of a peony bud? This will just be a quick little lesson for that. So peonies are also, they're really cooling. They have a strong relationship with ants. If anybody's ever grown peonies before, they know that there's like the ants are all over the unopened buds, and especially the open buds too. But they have this motherly like relationship with them because they're tending the peonies. They're not letting other invader insects on. They're always busy. So a lot of times people are like they don't know. They're like, I don't want these ants around. But they're really specific to the peonies. They are working with the nectar. They have this protective quality. And the peony bud has a signature for the fontanelles in the head. It's really helpful for tightening up the head. So if you ever feel like your head is just, it's coming loose, you got a little headache, or you got a little too much tension or something like that. So it goes really, really well together with the rose for basically what you were describing, but it also has a little bit more of that motherly, smotherly feeling that the peonies have. They're just so big and abundant as well, and they're very cooling.
So back to the Lunaria. Thanks for the little peony lesson. That's great. But on the Lunaria, the only things I really found about it that were interesting when I was looking into it today was that it's said to be the food of the cow Io, or Yo. So Zeus had his whole affair, one of many, with Io, and turns her into a cow instead of her original form as a nymph to try to hide her from the jealous Hera, and to give her something good to eat while she's stuck as a cow for the rest of eternity. He created the Lunaria annua plant. And I think it's kind of funny. I don't know if it's related, but in terms of the magical qualities, in addition to the movement and the currency elements, I was finding a lot of folklore about it having to do with honesty, that it like helps you be honest or helps you tell the truth. So that's the opposite of what Zeus was doing with Io. I think that's funny.
That's another name for it.
It
right?
is, yeah. Yep. It totally is.
What
Thank you
is?
for that point. Honesty. It's sometimes known as honesty plant. That's another name for it. So great point, Chance.
We were also weaving about Io, EO, and the cow being turned into the cow for the Taurus episode, because I brought forward the violet, which also was said to be like the snack that pacified this cow that was getting stung by the Mosca constellation. And what's really similar between these two is that they have, when it's in its basal, this has got like it's flower shaped leaves, but when it's got its basal shaped leaves that are closer to the ground, they look really similar to the violet leaves, which are heart shaped. So I think that maybe that story is kind of encapsulating this shape, that heart shape itself, and how we see that on the Empress card, that heart shaped emblem as well. I don't know. That's just what that made me think of that. You bringing that up again.
Oh, I love this one.
Aloe
Vera.
Hello there. Aloha. Haha. Get it? Aloha. Even marshmallow. That's really, I thought that was pretty funny. But why does aloe, hello, aloe, aloha. They all sound like this plant. And then aloe vera. Vera means true in Latin. Barbadensis. Sorry about that, my dog.
Stoked about aloe. I get it.
Okay. Barbadensis. That means beard. Little spikes of the beard. Diddly, it's okay. Oh, there's a skunk going on. Sorry about that. He's got to be a protecto boy. But the word aloe is a Latin word, is an Islamic word. So that's pretty interesting. I don't really know much about that. Or, yes, that's Diddly, my dog Diddly. I think it's really interesting though, that we don't normally have a lot of plants associated with the first names having an association with like Islamic words. Sorry about that. All right, so we have aloe, which is, we all know aloe. It's the time of year to put some aloe on your sunburn. It's the time of year to put some aloe on the firework burn. It's the time of year to put some aloe in your, just on your hot skin. And that's because it has this structured water inside of it too. Very, very, very structured mucilage. There's a couple of ways of acquiring that. And I'll just tell you right away, if you have an aloe plant, it's really easy to just take a leaf off the aloe and fillet it. So what you're going to do is kind of like chop the head off as if you were chopping off a head of a fish, if you're fishing or something like that, if you've ever done that. You can picture this, right? You chop off the apex of the spike, and then you chop off the bottom. And what you want to do is bleed out this. There's these bitter qualities to them. These bitter qualities are anthraquinones, and they are laxatives. They're purgative. So the outer shell, or this like crab-like outer shell structure, is I wouldn't say toxic. It's medicinal in its own way, but its medicine is that it is purgative and it makes you stay home.
It looks like crab legs, kind of.
It does, right? Yeah, totally. No, it's like what came first, the crab or the constellation, or the plant? That's funny how they're all kind of like, I don't know. It's fun to see these things. But anyway, after you bleed out that, you put it into a glass of water or something like that. You bleed out the yellow sap, and then you just cut it in half, and now you just can scoop out the meat as if it were like a watermelon. And you're trying to scoop it away from the rind, except
or crab legs.
Yeah, it's like crab legs, right? You don't eat the crab. You don't grind up the crab. You break it. You have to open it up and slurp it out or whatever. I've never done that. It doesn't sound appetizing to me, but I know there's people that do. That's what they do. And so, but anyway, so that's how you get it out. You get the slimy goo out. And in the Ayurvedic tradition, this plant is called Kumari, which is a Sanskrit word that means maiden. And it's highly revered in the Ayurvedic tradition because it is a plant that can reduce or pacify all three of the doshas. It helps the air in the space element by hydrating it. It helps the fiery element by cooling it down, and it helps the earth element by giving it a little bit of fibrous support to move things along. And then also in the Ayurvedic tradition, there's 7 tissues of the body. There's the plasma and the blood and the muscle, the fat, the bones, the nervous system, and the reproductive fluid in that order. And everything gets nourished in that order. When you eat something, it first nourishes the plasma of the blood, and then it goes on to the blood and whatnot. And there's herbs that'll pacify one of those, or 2 of those, or 3 of those, or certain orders. This one, it gets them all. It pacifies and helps out all of these parts of the body. So because of that, you'll find information about how aloe is really helpful for as an aphrodisiac. Well, how could that be? Well, because it's nourishing the dhatu, or the reproductive fluid. It's nourishing the tissues of the reproductive state. In fact, it's slimy, is it not? Slipperizing the insides. This is a plant that is anti-parasitic, but also has a microbiome balancing aspect. So that would be really helpful topically if we're talking about like reproductive organs as well. like vaginal things like that. And then, yeah, it's a herb that is just very cleansing on the inside of the body, very cooling. Worked with this herb for a couple of cases of people that had, I didn't realize it at the time, but they had some internal bleeding, and I was told afterwards that the aloe that they consumed was something that put an end to that. So that was really, really interesting. I wouldn't have recommended that on my account because it's just a little out of my wheelhouse or whatever. But so I think that's really interesting to know. Whenever there's some internal distress, we can always work with something like aloe, which will be very, very fortifying.
I wonder if that would apply to like hernias and things.
Well, maybe a couple. It depends on where the hernia is, but if it's a liver hernia, then I think, or like if somebody's got like a real strong one of these lines right here in their face, this is a liver line. I would recommend aloe for that for sure. Hiatal hernia. That's related to the diaphragm and cancer parts of the body too. What about y'all? You been using aloe before?
Yeah, definitely. And I was so glad to see that you chose aloe, because Mario actually brought up aloe would be a great one for the stream because of everything that Kyle just mentioned. But aloe has been a really great plant for me because I typically, especially when I was younger, I used to sunburn really badly. And so aloe would always just be like the first thing that I would go to. And it's really just soothing and relieving. And so to me, it's so Cancerian, just looking at it. I love it. So yeah, love aloe very much.
Yeah, even Chance, what you said regarding what kind of looked like saw teeth, or the looks like a crab's claw or whatever. It's interesting that there's this whole sort of weave with the crab having sawtooth claws and being associated actually with carpentry, of all things, which is really interesting because in The Wizard of Oz, my correspondence for Cancer is the Tin Man, and he was a woodsman. He had his axe with him and everything else. And so that's just something that this kind of reminds me of a little bit. And there's a few kind of Christ-like connections with Cancer as well, I would say. And Jupiter being exalted in Cancer, I think, kind of lends itself to that. And him being a carpenter, obviously, is kind of what I'm getting around to. But very good point there.
Jesus was embalmed with aloe in the Bible.
Dang.
Yeah,
interesting.
that's right. Yep.
Myrrh and aloe, specifically 100 pounds of it, which is quite a lot, before they wrapped the body in linens.
Yeah, back to hair care, you can put some aloe in your hair if you have like fuzzy hair. It's really helpful for that. But also, if you have dandruff, just throw a little aloe on there. That's great. It's just for like if you have dry skin, eczema, psoriasis. Try aloe first. I know that there's a lot of fun tricks and balms and all these things that I make, that Michelle makes, that a lot of people make. But just try some regular old aloe. You get yourself a plant at the store and just cut it up and do the preparation like I mentioned and scoop out the inside, and it's amazing for the results that you can get for eczema and psoriasis and dandruff and all kinds of things like that. Just a little bit of aloe. It's fantastic.
I agree. And I love aloe too. I like to use aloe juice. You can have the aloe vera gel, but then they also make like kind of the drinkable aloe, so it's more like water. And you can use that to make, face creams, body creams, because you can blend it into oils. And that's wonderful. The other thing I like to pair aloe with actually is DMSO. So if you're familiar with working with DMSO, just a little warning for people who aren't familiar with it, just do your research on it first. Amanda Vollmer is like a go-to, obviously, for a lot of people, just because you have to be careful with it. But in terms of being able to bring the nourishment into your skin really deeply, very quickly, aloe and DMSO are match made in heaven. And then just from personal experience using it, I'll take aloe, DMSO, and rose water and use that as a facial night treatment. And then same thing with the scalp care, mixing the aloe and DMSO, and you can put that on your scalp. And that is some awesome stuff.
I do the exact same thing. Almost. I do Amanda's DMSO, a lunaria sized drop of aloe, and a couple 2-3 drops of iodine, and I use that as a face cleanser almost every day. So
ooh,
yeah. Nice.
Speaking of the aloe hair care, the ancient Greeks allegedly believed it would cure baldness.
Huh.
That's when you start looking into the antiquity of aloe use. It's been just about every claim imaginable been applied to it in terms of what it can do. So that's kind of interesting to people if they want to look into that. My favorite was that Alexander the Great supposedly kept aloe in wagons or carts where it could be planted there and transported so that it would stay alive and stay fresh as a medicine for healing soldiers' wounds in battle. If there was such a person as Alexander the Great, I don't know. Jury's out on that for me.
Yeah, it really is amazing. There's a difference between aloe gel and the plant. The gel that you might find in the stores is the juice that's been pasteurized, and what all the stuff that they do when they take away the vitality and the wonderful nutrients within the plant, and then they pasteurize it, and then they got to add some preservatives and whatnot to keep it so it stays this weird color green on the shelf. So
there's a lot of aloe puns going on in the chat right now. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
The Aloe-Sinian mysteries. Good one. Now I got some Borkin dogs. Great. Anyone else want to have some dogs say hi? I know you've got one, Emily, right?
I know. Did you hear him chowing down on a fly before? Let's see if I can. It's hot today. Wally.
Oh, he's alive.
Aw, nice.
Hey, buddy. He's like, I've been napping all day. It's 95 degrees.
Well, it's appropriate. You always see 2 dogs on the moon card, right?
Ooh, good point.
Nice.
We almost got a spit take.
Yeah, the
A
dogs
dog
are like,
and
don't
a
forget.
I know, a dog and a wolf. It's the symbol of the evolution of our soul when we sleep. That's basically what Wally is to me.
Alrighty, so here we are with coconut. This
Got some
I have
coconut
to.
water.
Nice. So actually, Mario brought this one up to me that it would be a good one. So thank you, bub, because it's perfect. As soon as he said it, I was like, yes, that makes so much sense. Let's talk about coconut. I love coconut. Not everybody loves coconut, but I find it to be pleasant on so many levels. The scent, the taste, the feeling of the oil, how nourishing it is. And it's beautiful, and it grows in a lot of beautiful areas in the tropics. It is known as the tree of life to a lot of Pacific Islanders because, this tree almost and pretty much every part can be used for something, whether it's going to be food or it's going to be shelter or a tool or what have you. That is how they look at this tree because it's so valuable. And trees typically kind of, obviously the tree of life, but a lot of trees are like that, where there's so many uses for almost every single tree that, you can't deny that it is like a central part of so many people's lives and has been forever and always will be. So I love that, there's the hard exterior of the actual like coconut itself. And then when you crack that open, especially when it's a young coconut, it's going to be like soft and watery. And even if it's a mature coconut, which is the brown coconut, the color of the flesh, there's like a softness to it. There's a freshness to coconut, which I feel like you get that fresh water sort of feeling from it for sure. I love coconut oil as just on its own as a moisturizer. For years, that's all I used. It was just straight organic, unrefined coconut oil for pretty much everything. And that's kind of going back along to the tree of life thing, because it's so versatile. You can cook with it, you can bake with it, you can use it for beauty, you can use it for hair, you can use it to clear up certain infections on your skin, you can use it to stimulate digestion. A lot of people know it as an oil that has a lot of medium chain fatty acids in it. And so when you hear that, that's basically kind of meaning that it's a fat that it like burns quickly. So it can increase, not necessarily increase your metabolism or like make you lose weight, but the whole thing behind it is that the fat burns up faster than a lot of other fats do. So you have like less risk of it kind of like hanging around or whatever you want to say. But so a lot of times you'll see coconut being used for a way to encourage weight loss if somebody's trying to do that. Or, you know, if you're fasting and a great way to break a fast actually is to just eat coconut oil, you know, and then slowly assimilate yourself back to food. So starting off with like the unrefined coconut oil and then moving on to broth. And actually, if you are fasting and you're having a hard time or whatever, you can eat coconut oil and you can still stay in ketosis while you're fasting. So you won't break your fast. But what it can do is can actually just give you that extra boost that you might need to just, you know, stay in the pocket with a fast. You can do that with coconut oil. And so for a long time too, like I would start my morning off with coconut oil. I would get out of the shower, I would moisturize with coconut oil, and I would just be like eating it by the spoonful. And there's something very satisfying about it. A lot of people know it to be used as a means to do oil pulling. You know, that's a great way to remove kind of like anything that might be not so savory in the mouth. Another thing too, aids digestion, as I said, but could help expel parasites, which I think is another reason why it's a really great pairing for fasting. Because a lot of times when you're fasting, that is your opportunity to kind of like dig deeper and to kind of maybe encourage movement in things that you might not be able to touch when you're still, you know, eating food. The fast will allow even parasites to kind of like come to the surface, and then the coconut oil could help to expel that. And another interesting thing I just learned is that it's an antidote for pesticide poisoning. Now, I can't confirm that because I haven't done it myself or whatever, but when I was doing research, that was one of the things that came up a couple times, which I thought was interesting. So again, going back to the detox kind of thing. And then when I think about tropics, warm, hot, you know, lots of sweating, then I think of Cancer and I think of water and I think of movement. So kind of interesting that that goes along with the coconut. And it's also a diuretic. So the water, drinking the water can actually help stimulate more movement. Diuretic, we've talked about diuretics before, but for those who might not know, diuretic is just something that's going to stimulate urination. So it's going to start things to move. Coffee is a very well-known diuretic. So a lot of times you drink coffee, whoa, I gotta pee. Okay, and so coconut water isn't necessarily gonna do that. It's not like a stimulant like coffee is. But if you were having some sort of, you know, discomfort with your bladder, maybe something's coming up, you know, and you're not sure, I highly recommend just getting yourself some nice coconut water that is just pure coconut water. Because sometimes too, there's like, you always got to read your labels for sure, because a lot of times coconut water, they'll like add sugar and stuff. And some of my favorite tasting coconut water is the coconut water that comes from a young coconut. And a lot of times too, it's like, it's a little bit sweeter. Sometimes it turns pink. And I think that has something to do with like the antioxidants in it. I'm not 100% sure, but the difference between like a young coconut and the mature coconut is the flavor of the water and then the meat that's inside. And the meat inside of a mature coconut is actually how they get the coconut oil. And you can also make coconut milk. So you can make your own coconut milk by using the coconut meat. And then with a young coconut, which is really fun, you can actually make coconut yogurt because that flesh is so soft, you can take that out and you can blend it, and then you can add you can add your own probiotics, or you could try and probably ferment it. I've never done the just like straight fermenting without the probiotics, but if you've never had fresh coconut yogurt, if you like coconut, I highly recommend it. And just like look yourself up a recipe online. And yeah, it's easy enough to just add probiotics. Like you can buy like a high quality probiotic pill, and you can just add it to that meat and you let it sit overnight, and it creates the most delicious fermented yogurt that I've ever had. So there's coconut.
I'd like to add, if you have 2 halves of coconut and you bang them together, you're basically riding a horse.
Yes, indeed.
I have tried this. Oh, you're muted there, Kyle.
This is a great one, Michelle. Great. I love the signatures too. It's lunar inside. By the way, what is the moon? Is it a bowl? Is it a ball? Sorry, guys. And the holes that are like the little that are like the dents that are on the moon, right? The craters.
Also said to resemble sometimes like a face of a ghost.
I was just Googling how many people die from a coconut falling on their head. I think there's a statistic from that.
Let us know what you find out. And I'll add that, it's definitely a very spiritualized tree as far as symbolism goes in the East, the farther East, really. Like in India, the coconut is one of the gifts that is, I think it's, Emily can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Vishnu bring the coconut tree down to earth for Lakshmi?
Ooh, I don't remember. I have some other thoughts about coconuts. I don't remember on that one. You're probably right, though.
Lay them on us.
Well, you just mentioned Googling how many people die from a coconut hitting them on the head. And I had this flashback memory because when I was in my 20s, my first job was teaching in a music conservatory in India for these music people. So at one point, we worked with British people at a university in London, and then we were getting our school accredited through that school, and we had to fit the English things that they needed. And one of the things they needed was a net under the coconut tree. The British people were like, we can't let this school do this exchange program you're trying to set up if the coconut tree doesn't have this safety mechanism. And the people, there were a couple people who were on this panel who were making these things, and they were like, coconuts don't fall on people's heads. And you saw this sort of cultural clash in sort of negotiating this, where they both sides were kind of like, you just don't get it. We need this. We need the net from the British people. And the other people were like, the net is stupid because the coconuts don't fall on people's heads. And I still think about that coconut tree. But I thought it was interesting. And by the way, I'm an oil puller with coconut oil. So I loved that you brought that up. But when you brought up the pesticide poisoning, that's something recently I learned something about that, which is pretty interesting, which is that, you know how a lot of people suddenly had celiac disease, which is that gluten sensitivity or intolerance. And maybe 20 years ago, you didn't hear about it very much. I had met maybe one person with it, and then suddenly a lot of people had it. And one of the things that corresponds with the uptick in instances of celiac disease was the practice of using Roundup as a drying agent rather than just an insecticide around plants. So there were certain wheat companies that when they harvested the wheat, sprayed Roundup on it afterwards. And so there was a lot more pesticide chemicals in the wheat. And so, you know, I heard that and I was like, well, do we really have celiac disease? Maybe. But do we, is part of it maybe this? Because there are certain people you'll see, like they can go to Europe and have bread, but they can't have bread in the US, or certain things like that. And so maybe coconut is the answer.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that. I've thought about that with the celiac stuff as well, because not to say that somebody couldn't have that, but I have wondered what is really going on with it. So that's interesting. And one other thing that I wanted to say about the coconut, for people with pets, cats and dogs, but specifically cats, we have experience with. They love coconut oil. Our cat, rest in peace, Carl. He loved coconut oil, and he always had a little jar or a little dish of coconut oil. And actually, as he got older, before he passed, he was eating it like multiple times a day. And everybody that would always come over would always comment on his coat, on his fur. And so it's just a really great thing to give your pets for a lot of reasons. The same benefits that we get. So the digestion as well, but specifically for their coat. So maybe, give that a try, and you might never know if they like it. But the way we found out that Carl liked it was that when I was using it as a moisturizer all the time, I would go to Mario's apartment and I would sit with Carl, and he'd be like licking my hands. And he always would lick my hands. And I was like, why does he lick my hands? And then it was like, oh my God, the coconut oil. And then we started giving him coconut oil. And it was like, okay, well, this dude just likes the coconut oil. It's not me. It's just the coconut oil.
I have a really good toothpaste I use that's coconut oil based. And it also has like white charcoal, like activated charcoal, but it's white instead of what you normally find, which is black. So it's not like staining your sink or if you get it on your clothes causing problems. I really enjoy that. So I basically just use more toothpaste than you would normally use, brush my teeth with it, and then just leave it there to oil pull with the toothpaste. So it's kind of like a convenient 2-in-1. I have to remember the brand of that. It's really great though. Coconut oil toothpaste.
Nice. That's awesome, dude. I'm noticing a lot of C words. So chariot, crab, claw, the Hebrew letter het starts with a C, and then also crescent, and then coconut. And now I just have to mention it. I'm like, did the C come from the crescent of the moon? Is it a reference to the moon? And so the moon is always changing, and obviously it creates that crescent shape. And so I think a lot of the letters that we have take inspiration from what's going on, out there. So it just makes me wonder if that's the case. So I don't know if you guys have ever thought about that.
Well, the third letter of the Hebrew alphabet would be, forgive my pronunciation again, sorry, Gimel, right? Which is the letter associated with the high priestess, who's the moon, who would be the ruler of Cancer. So I wonder, maybe you're onto something.
Yeah,
C
that's and
right.
G do interchange.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. Cool. So that's what I wanted to put out there. And then I just have a quick note here, too. I just haven't mentioned it, but there's a lot of people, a lot of traditions that basically suggest that the moon is like the first pit stop out of here. That various ascension, groups and like rituals and stuff like that, they say that if you're going to go through the cosmos, if you're going to visit the planets, if that's something you want to do, I've never done it myself, but that the moon is like the first pit stop. It's like a gateway to other planets. And also when you return, it is the last gate here as well. And when you look at the moon card, you always have those towers, right? And it implies a gateway. It implies a portal. It implies all of these different things. And so the moon for a very long time has basically been compared to some sort of doorway that way. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
One thing I found out was the back to the world axis symbolism. The Philippines consider the coconut tree the tree of life. And I think that India probably follows that sentiment. But in the Philippines, they use all parts of the coconut tree which is interesting. In India, they call it the Kalpa Vrishka, the tree which provides all necessities, which is pretty cool. And
Nice.
you
Yeah, that
know,
makes
there's
sense.
there's a very Cancerian thing about it in terms of like the womb metaphor and birth, because so theoretically coconuts can fall into the sea and get carried far away and, you know, journey into the unknown and then sprout a actual palm, you know, later on somewhere far away. So that's another very cool thing about them.
Yeah,
You
dude.
know, a
The sea,
charioteer wise, right?
the ocean, the sea, the letter C, right?
Yeah. So we got a caller, video message call in, actually. It's not too long. There's 2 of them. So we got about a minute and a half from our friend Mick. I want to see what he's throwing out there for our Cancerian plants.
So have you guys ever heard of or tried mangosteen? It is so good. Oh my god. I've known about this fruit for like years, and I just saw it in the grocery store last week, and I spent like $50 on it, and it was amazing. And like, it's sweet and floral and kind of soapy almost, you know? So I saved all the hulls because I read that every part of it is medicinal, and I made an infusion. So I made a tea out of it, and it is very tart. But wow, do I feel clean, like inside.
Very awesome. Mangosteen. Cool name. Looks really crazy. Let me pull up this image here. Definitely has like a crab signature to it with how thick that rind is.
Yeah, and like a meaty inside too. Yeah, very cool. Mangosteen. It's like a Jewish mango.
back to your C Gimel weave. Dylan makes a good point that G and C interchanging, G being the 7th letter, Cancer is 7 in the tarot. Pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Takes place predominantly during the 7th month of the year.
Yeah, guys, we made it to the end of our slides. How we feeling? Oh, wait, no, there's this slide too. We just didn't show it while we were talking.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah.
I made an infusion this morning of linden, and it's also known as European lime. And we were drinking coconut water today. We put the lime in the coconut and we drink them both up. I just thought of that. So I can't believe I didn't think of that earlier. That would have been hilarious.
Yeah, linden is also called lime.
Yeah, it's a lime. Yeah, it's the lime.
We started with lime and ended with coconut. All right. You guys want to go meet at the go down to the beach and hit the bar, I guess, after this? See you there.
Totally.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to.
Pina. Pina coladas. Totally. Yeah, pina. That's the Spanish word for coconut, right? Which has got this symbolism of. Oh, that's a symbol. Oh, pineapple. Never mind. That's wrong plant.
All right. Well, this feels good. I think we're at a good point to make our way around and give some closing thoughts and let people know what we have coming up on our individual channels and services. So let's start with the our pair to the top right.
Awesome. Thank you, Chance, as always. Thank you, Emily and Kyle and Babe, for being here as well. Thanks, everyone in the chat. These are just such a joy to do because I learn so much from them. I learn while I'm preparing, then I learn while I'm talking to all y'all, and it's really fun. So thank you so much. Cancer, I love Cancer because I've learned so much about Cancer from Mario, him being a Cancer. So it's really fun to learn through, I feel like, the people that we know who are the signs. It's very interesting to me. That's the way that I kind of relate with astrology. I always think of the people that I know who are a certain sign, and then I can like take the correspondences, wrap them over, and then I feel like it's just a really good way to get to know the signs better. So this was really fun. Michelle's Healing Home, for any inquiries, michelleshealinghome.com is my website. I have a podcast every Tuesday, which is called The Healing Home. I'm not going to be having a show this coming week because we're actually traveling down to Fresno for a wedding. But the following week, on July 18th, I'm very excited that I'm going to be talking to Dr. Elderberry. And Kyle, I know you know who she is, and I am so excited that she's down to talk. She is a naturopathic doctor. She is a clinical herbalist. She's a practicing herbalist. She works a lot with homeopathy. She is on the level, people, and she understands how emotions play into our health and the ailments that we go through. She understands that being in the victim mindset is actually really detrimental to your health. I highly recommend following her on Instagram if you want to get to know her better and find out what she's doing. But she's a lovely woman. I'm really excited to talk to her. And then we won't be having last Thursday this week because we'll be traveling, but we'll be back with everybody the following Thursday.
Yeah, this was fun as always. If you guys are interested in anything I have going on, you can check out symbolicstudies.com. Symbolic.studies on Instagram is another hub. But otherwise, I've got a few things kind of cooking behind the scenes, but nothing that I want to announce just yet. But this was it's always a good time. It's a pleasure. So thank you, Chance. Thank you, Kyle. Emily, thank you for filling in for Gabe. I learned some things I want to follow up with, as per usual. But yeah, looking forward to the next one. Leo.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the best one. Guys, watch out. That's my ascendant. So once the sun gets to my first house, I'm going to be like really lively. You might not be able to give me a shut up. I want to say thanks over to some people on the Rockfin side. Braden, my man, Braden Mosey, tipping $20. Thank you, dude. And Lisa Rose tipped $20 as well. Appreciate that very much. She says, thank you all for this Astro Herbalism gravy. Much love and appreciation to Kyle, and congratulations on the new baby, Chance. Well, not yet, but it's on the way. Thank you, Scott and Lisa. Appreciate you guys a lot. So yes, if you guys haven't heard, there is a baby on the way for me. Great time to show some extra support, maybe, if you're feeling it. So we appreciate that very much. And yeah, Emily, what do you got going on?
Your own baby and not just a nephew?
I am having my own baby. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's going to have roughly the same birthday as my nephew that was just born, which is pretty cool. They'll be just a year apart.
That'll be great. Well, congratulations. Happy birthday, Mario. Gosh, it was great being here with you guys. Maybe I'll just go and share what I got going on and say goodbye. I have a book. If anyone ever wants to read about Astro Yoga, you can read this book. It's on Amazon and other places, Barnes and Noble, I think. I don't know. But you can find it. It's on the internet. You just Google Astro Yoga for an Aquarian age. And if you don't know about Astro Yoga, I invite you to Google that too, because the internet has a lot of good information. I'm in the process of launching something called the International School of Astro Yoga. So I already have astrology readings and memberships and courses. So if anybody wants to learn stuff or work with me in a one-on-one fashion or in a group setting, those are available on my website, emilyridout.com. And pretty soon we'll have even more things in the works. Some of the languages we've been translating the work into will be available, and different things. So if you are curious about that, I have an email list. I send out a weekly forecast. I'm on the internet too. You can find me. And thanks for having me on. This was such a delight to hear from herbalist people about your takes on it. I have a lot of good takeaways that I can go think about now. And Chance, it's always a pleasure to connect with you in this ether space, and all y'all.
I think you need to go on Michelle's Healing Home because
I second that. I was going to say something and I'm like, I'll just email her after the show.
yeah, you guys need to be in touch because also you're all Pacific Northwesterners. So you could be real life friends potentially.
Where are you guys?
We're like an hour east of Portland, but we were in Portland for like 12 years or something.
Oh,
So we're out in the gorge.
Yep.
I'm going to Portland on Saturday.
Ooh.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. She
Yeah,
actually
you
she brought up
you
earlier
need to be
today having
friends.
you on the show, by the way.
I did. I totally did. So, and I
Oh,
was
cool.
like, oh, it'll be cool to like actually have conversation with you tonight to just, get the feel and everything. So it'll be fun. I would love to have you on.
Totally. Get email or call any way that you can. I'll put my email in our chat.
Awesome. I look forward to that episode. Yeah, Michelle's podcast is totally crushing. And Emily, you're always welcome back if you have something you want to talk about or just want to call in midway through an episode or something. You're definitely always welcome. And when you get that school launch, we'll make sure and do something to let everybody know.
For sure. Yeah, I'd love to come back anytime you want to talk. It's always stimulating conversation here.
Oh yeah, once we had you and Mario going on Cancer and chariot symbolism in the first 45 minutes, I was like, oh, we just need to bring these two together more often. It's it's really good.
Yeah, we could have riffed on the tarot for a while, I have a feeling. Deep dive.
As we do on a mostly weekly basis. Hey, Kazi, thank you for the generous super chat. Appreciate that. Awesome. Very, very, very generous. Kyle, what's up with you? What you got coming up?
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having this be a great host for all of this stuff. It's really nice to meet you, Emily. Really been enjoying your work that you put out for free. Maybe one of these days I'll invest in some good stuff too. And the book, it looks excellent too. So I think that'll be the first thing. But yeah, I really hope that since we're all talking about talking again, I hope that we have a venue once again where we can chat as well. It's been really nice to meet you. And Chance, congratulations on the baby. Of course, Serena and Davide and I adore you and Jennifer. So congratulations. And find my stuff at tippecanoeherbs.com. I'm a medicine maker. I have a huge selection of herbs and medicinal herbs. And if you use the code InnerVerse at checkout, you get a discount, and I kick that savings back to my man Chance. So you're going to be supporting me. You're going to be supporting him. And you'll be supporting some community-made medicine, like harvested linden flowers from the ground after the storm. These types of things, these types of stories I know about the medicine that we make. And then we got some classes and stuff online. I do all kinds of classes, long-term classes, short-term classes. You'll find them at tippecanoeherbs.com. And we have the Herb of the Week, which is a really fun podcast series. It's $1 an episode, 52 herbs, 52 lessons, 52 weeks. They're all about an hour long. And I think the fireworks are going to start and my dog's going to start barking again. So I'll jump out. But thanks, y'all. And also thanks, Mario and Michelle, my old friends. Oh, one last plug since the dog's quiet. I'm recently using some soap that Michelle gifted me, some mugwort soap, and it is the best soap ever. I'm kind of a soap nerd, so it is fantastic, above and beyond. I feel very wild and sexy and fresh. So thank you.
Thank you, man. I know when you said, what did you say? It makes you feel like a fresh, sexy wildling or something.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's the best review ever.
Yeah,
thank you. I'm so glad you love it. I really love that soap too. So yeah. It's great.
This
I
is
love
a near
making
perfect
soap.
episode with the exception, and we didn't get a jingle out of Kyle, but there's always next time.
I did the lime and the coconut, but that's probably copyright. I'll come up with something.
Okay, make sure you work on something for Leo. Leo wants a performance.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pull me off the stage for that one.
All right, everybody. Well, it's been a good time hanging out. Look forward to presenting an awesome InnerVerse episode on Sunday. So watch out for that, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Much love, everybody.